All right, so for everyone here, this is week 8. We got 2 more weeks before the final presentation. Tonight, we're going to do some pitch practice and go through each one of the decks. We'll do like a real pitch for that first half. Then when we get into those slides that we just added from last week, you can just kind of walk us through that. But that first half of that pitch, and I have looked at all the pitches that have been updated today. I feel very confident that that first half of that pitch is ready to kind of at least step into delivering it to us in kind of a presentation form, right? So we'll do the first half all the way through the sections that we started just last week. And then as we progress, we'll give you feedback. Again, we have between this week and next week for more practice, getting your deck kind of mostly finalized for next week's kind of dress rehearsal. But we'll have time. We can meet with you all during next week as well as the week after between this and the final. So without any further ado, I am going to just, instead of asking for volunteers like I've done in the past, we just have 3. So everybody's going to go pretty quickly, and I'm just going to pick one, and that's going to be team number 3. So if someone can come up with team number 3, come off mic, tell me that you're ready to give us a pitch. Now, I would love to hand over co-host to whoever said yes right then, and you walk us through the deck, or I can pull up the deck, your choice.
Sorry, my dogs are in the background losing their mind. Yeah, you can just have the control. That's totally fine.
And then you're just gonna tell me to move forward each slide?
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, we don't really have a specific like script ready yet. We have like general ideas of like what we want to talk about, but it's not like set in stone yet. Is that okay?
That's fine. Yes. Step us through your thoughts, step us through as much of the pitch as you can. This goes for all the teams. I mean, if you were perfectly ready and polished and ready to go, I'd have been completely overwhelmed with surprise about right at this point, right? We're still kind of piecing it together. So just walk us through it. So let me pull up your deck here. And I said team number 3, right? Yes.
Yes.
All right. And then let me make this a little bigger. And Madison, you're going to be the one doing the presentation? Or doing the walkthrough? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, does everyone see a revolutionary anti-seizure drug slide? Perfect, Rohan's giving me a thumbs up. All right, Madison, why don't you just walk us through it then?
All right, so if you can click to the next slide. So we're going to present on JW65. So here we're just talking about a little bit of epilepsy background, just to get everybody on the same page. We wanted to make sure that everyone knows what epilepsy is, because a lot of people know what seizures are, but they don't necessarily know about epilepsy. And so this is kind of just us introducing the topic of epilepsy, and then you can click to the next slide.
Hey, just I'm gonna make one note. I mean, tonight, as we're going through these things, if one of us, like Shelby, Ryan, Rohan, Erica, you want to give some feedback, we can do. I think it might be best to kind of cover it slide by slide, just for a few minutes after each one, if you have anything to say. My only thing to say with this one is I thank you very much. I think explaining epilepsy different from the seizures is really going to set that stage for your conversation pretty well. Does anybody else have anything about this slide at this point?
Yeah, and this is sort of a general comment to everybody with their first intro slides. It's always good to, I think, tell a story, even if it's a made up story, to bring in the audience so that they can relate to it. And that story could involve like a patient or a relative or somebody you know with epilepsy. And so it makes it more personal, and I think the audience connects with that. So I think that's something that the teams that have won over the last couple of years have done. And so it's to your benefit to possibly do that as well.
Yeah, we did notice that. So we were watching a couple of the examples from last year and like the winner, and they did do that. So that was kind of our plan on the revolutionary, on the like title slide, and then getting into this. We just haven't written that up yet, so it's in the works.
Okay, great.
Thank you, though.
Last thing I would say is there is a lot of information on this one slide, and I think you could probably break it up into 2 slides, or you can show the left side first, and then as you're talking and you start bringing up what's on the right side, you let it show up a little bit later. It's just a lot, and sometimes people kind of get carried away with trying to read what you wrote down versus listening to what you're saying, and you really want people to listen to what you're saying.
For sure. Yeah, we'll definitely use like animations and things like that. I figured just putting those in last would be great. Yeah. So we're just kind of trying to put everything together, and then we'll put in things like that. But thank you, Erica. That's a great suggestion as well.
All right, if you have any more comments for this first slide, I am going to try to move us along. Just drop them in chat. So if anybody else has any comments or critiques or anything otherwise constructive to offer this team, drop it in chat and I'll send the chat record out if anybody needs it. All right, Madison, go to the next slide.
Yes, please.
Okay, go ahead.
And so this is just, so we talked about a little bit about epilepsy, and this ties back to our elevator pitch. It's one of the figures that I had in that. And so I wanted to bring it back into our slide deck to really highlight the problems that we're talking about. So yes, we talked about epilepsy. It affects 65 million people worldwide, 3.4 million in the US specifically. But there are nearly 1 million Americans suffering from seizure, drug-resistant epilepsy, which kind of ties into the next slide. But going back to what Ryan was saying, I specifically chose this infographic because it talks about 1 out of 26 people in the US will develop epilepsy in their lifetime, kind of really pulling in that personality or like that personal, like the tying back to people, right? The ethos piece, trying to relate that you probably do know somebody that does have epilepsy, and this could be a major factor. So again, just kind of building that story, and then we really get into the problem on the next slide.
I think this is good. I mean, Ryan, this is kind of what you're talking about. And I just wanted to make the one kind of caveat that although it's good, sometimes it's hard to weave an avatar.
It's not a critical information.
All right, someone needs to go. Oh, that might be Madison. Hang on a second. So sometimes it might be hard to weave an avatar or some sort of person or story through most of your slides, right? So it's not always the case. I do think it comes across more compelling when you do talk about that, like Ryan said. But also here, I think you're doing a just enough job, and you might not need to go much deeper, but certainly making kind of that aha moment statement of you knowing someone, possibly knowing someone out of 1 out of 26 people, I think is kind of what we're talking about, right? Bringing it to home.
Yes, exactly.
And then just one thing to add, and this is super nitpicky, but I noticed that the color scheme of your slides are all these shades of blue, and then this slide adds in all this different purple, and it kind of gets away from the theme. I know you didn't make this, so you pulled it probably from the internet or something, but just something that caught my attention. Not that you have to change it, just something to be aware of.
No, yeah, definitely. Thank you. We tried to keep the like blue and purple theme because the purple kept appearing in a lot of like the infographics online as well. So we tried to maintain it a little bit.
Yeah, just introduce it a little bit earlier. That way we can see it, and as it is part of the theme, the whole color palette, if you want to stick with the purples too.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else for slide 3? All right, slide 4, Madison.
So this really gets into the meat of the problem. The 1/3 of epilepsy patients suffering from this drug-resistant epilepsy. We have the infographic on the side, again, going to add in different segments to really talk about and highlight the different pieces of drug-resistant epilepsy, how it affects different people. And then again, with after finishing talking about drug-resistant epilepsy, another part of the problem is the limited treatment options, which again will appear on the bottom. Sorry, I'm like waving my point around, but the 1st generation, 2nd generation, and 3rd generation, these are different types of epilepsy medications that are currently available, and there are different generations of drugs. And although there are these 3 generations of drugs, they are limited in the sense that they all target very similar aspects, and they do produce lots of adverse effects. And so our new novel compound is supposed to be a novel target with less adverse effects. So really painting the picture of these patients suffering from drug-resistant epilepsy, and also offering patients that do already have medications, potentially a new medication with less side effects.
I actually see something on the bottom of this slide where it says undertreated epilepsy. Almost, you see how it has that kind of flow chart of seizure-related injury, et cetera, et cetera. You can almost make a patient story out of that, like kind of following this path, Yeah,
that was kind of our idea, actually.
Yeah, that's a good little infographic kind of thing down at the bottom.
I think also that this is really maybe 2 slides, and really the second slide is a solution slide, right? So you're kind of talking about the medical side of the problem. Then you should but then you've got to drill it down a little bit more to the DRE with this slide. I get it. And the infographic I think is good. And what Erica just said and what Ryan was suggesting, this is the point to really kind of drive it home if you hadn't already planted the seed, right? A very short journey statement about a patient that's in this case. And then this first, second, third generation, I think maybe should be in a second slide that is really the pivot to the solution. And you can do this. You can actually say, compare like over the left, first generation, second generation, third generation, give the reasons why they're ineffective. And then JW65, this could actually be the introduction of what yours does. So it's less of a competitive matrix. And it's certainly, I don't want to make it sound like it's got to be a table or anything. I'm just saying on the competitive matrix slide, you're comparing against competitors. On the solution slide, you could actually introduce the competitor's product solution that you are doing better against each other. So I think this probably needs to be broken up into two slides. It was a lot that you discussed. I think a lot of it was good, but this could be the end of the problem and then also the beginning of the solution on the next slide.
Okay, yeah, we were like struggling. I felt like Lee and I today were like combining and then like separating different types of slides. We're trying to figure out like what works best. Because it's that 7-minute time point, I felt like we couldn't have too many slides, but yeah, we'll definitely start spreading this out and then getting into the solution piece. So that's
I don't know what you meant, what you're doing on this slide, right? So I mean, it's like, yeah. And you're about to tell us, but I'm gonna let anybody else have some comments too. But I mean, these two slides, 4 and 5, as they exist right now, probably just need to change a little bit. So I don't really think you're going to add a slide. I think you're probably going to just adjust slide 5 to be the two pieces of what we're talking about.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Any other comment suggestions about slide 4 before we move on to 5?
I'd almost say, actually, I think about almost flipping around the sort of what you're talking on this slide. Instead of focusing so much on like what else is out there, I would almost start focusing on like what are the problems that you could end up with, or so like these are all the sort of major problems, and think about like, drug resistant epilepsy is a problem, but I think it's pretty self-explanatory in the title. It's resistant to drugs that are out there, and like rather than focusing on these are all these options and generations of drugs that are out there, focus on like this is what could happen, this is how many people it affects, and like sort of make that sort of emotional point first off in terms of
Yeah, that's a good way to present this whole DRE slide. These are the worst case of the situations affecting the most, and we can talk about the scientific things, but I like what you said also, Rohan, which is personifying the journey, going back to what Eric and Ryan are saying, with like, what are the end results of this, right? Like how negatively does this actually impact this kind of lifestyle that this person is forced to live with because they're drug resistant? And that really, I see them down here at the bottom right, depression, anxiety, development issues. These are things that this slide could really be more of that punch slide describing patients with DRE. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, that's something I guess we hadn't thought of. So I'll have to like rewatch the slides from today and kind of really take in what you guys are saying. Because I don't know how we could do that right now, but
after just marinate on it a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. Okay.
All right, slide 5.
And so this is going to be.
What was your plan here?
Yeah, so this was just basically our solution slide. This is the big take home, like, hey, this is the problem. Like, oh, these are all the things that are out there. This is the problem we're trying to solve. And so introducing our novel anti-seizure drug, JW65, kind of giving just like a little bit into like why it's going to be this revolutionary anti-seizure drug, because it targets a previously unexplored target for epilepsy, in the treatment of epilepsy.
All right, we'll take what we said with slide 4 and this slide and give us another pass at kind of setting up that narrative between the two.
Oh gosh, on the spot. Okay.
No, not on the spot. Not on the spot.
Do you want me to redo it now? Okay.
No, I'm going to give you a whole week.
Perfect. Sounds great.
No. Just good. I'm glad you had that little panic attack, because then I can go ahead and let everyone off the hook and say the suggestions and comments that we're making tonight do not have to be immediately done. And if we challenge you and we tell you, hey, think of it a different way, we're probably just going to walk you through that. And then, like we said, you can marinate on it. These are still your decks, right? We're giving you helpful feedback just because of how much experience all of us have of giving and seeing slides like this. So certainly take what we say, still stick to your guns in some areas if you really feel like that's what you want to deliver and you're going to deliver it with punch. But, you know, take what we say, marinate it, give you another week to kind of make all the polishes up and everything else. And then we'll come back and see how they are next week. Just remember, next week is the last week before the final week. So we got a lot of work to do in the next 7 days, but okay, let's move on. All right, slide 6.
So we were looking to make this a little bit more, let's say, punchy, like interesting, but we really couldn't figure out how to. So these are our unique value propositions. And then actually, I'm going to make you crazy. If you can skip 2 slides down, you don't even have to change to it, but I just want you specifically to look at it, Brian. So this is going to be our competitive matrix. And so we did take the better pharmacokinetic profile and then the less toxicity. And we're trying to then graph our competitors on a matrix, like you were saying, comparatively to ours. And then, so I was wondering if we could combine the unique value propositions with the competitive matrix. Would that be an okay way to present the slide? Is that, again, too much data? Like, what's sort of your thoughts on that?
I read Gartner's quadrant reports every quarter. I consume matrix like this all the time. If you can combine the unique value proposition with your competitors in a kind of cool data-driven method like that, I would love to see it.
Okay. Yeah, that was kind of going to be our goal. That's like what we were working on doing today. So we're just kind of like gathering the data to make that plot. And then the size of the dots on the plot as well will also be another factor of the different types of seizures that they can create. So going across, we have high toxicity to low toxicity. And in a drug, of course, we want lower toxic effects. And then going top to bottom, we have excellent pharmacokinetic properties and then poor pharmacokinetic properties. And those, again, are on a spectrum. You want better pharmacokinetic properties, meaning that you are better, it's a better drug to be absorbed, distributed, get to where it's going. And then we have JW 65 over here in the corner. And so we've been trying to collect data on all of the other competitors out there, maybe not all of them, but at least some of them, and plot them on the graph like this. So yeah, again, highlighting our unique properties.
Yeah, I mean, definitely need to figure out what the indices is to make the bubbles the size they are, right? Because it's not going to be nearly as compelling if all the bubbles are just bubbles and they're all the same size. Or is it, right, nor is it going to be compelling if it's arbitrary and you just change the size of the bubbles just to make it look different, right? So find a data point for that to make it work. And I want to actually ask the other facilitators what they think. But one thing I want to say is I like the idea in concept, right? And I think it could look cool. And I think you could really combine some really good 2 sides of the data, the unique value propositions, which is also a competitive advantage if you understand those better of your customer than your competitors do, but then also your competitors and how they're doing things. So I like the whole concept, but my challenge to you is you still have to figure out how to deliver a message that is both unique value proposition and competitive matrix unfair advantages without either one of them overshadowing or losing both of them in this pretty matrix that you've got here, the quadrant here. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, I do.
What does everybody else think? I kind of gave it a big vote, yes, but I mean, Ryan, Rohan, Erica, Shelby, what do y'all think of this concept?
No, I agree with what you're saying. I think being able to, and I've only seen that lately in like, newer pitch decks, but being able to communicate those things as they overlap like concentric circles, but they're also separate, and being able to like communicate the value of both of those, I think is important. But otherwise, yeah, I mean, I'm basically just echoing what Brian said.
Ryan, Rohan, Erica, y'all agree?
I'm just gonna. For me, it's message over anything. So like the content that you're trying to get across, where you are in terms of your competitive landscape and what value you bring. I mean, just very basic. I take that in a square chart over like something that I'm trying to look at and figure out what the different size circles mean and stuff like that. If you can do it, great. But for me, it's more content over anything.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, no, I like the visual. I think just the 2 axes and like a size, you already have like 3 variables you can put in there right there. I'm not sure if you need, for kind of things like toxicity, if you really need to have like a 2-sided axis. I'm not sure if that's more or less confusing because it's really just a single scale, right? You really just need one quadrant in this plot right now for what you've got, at least the way I think about it. But yeah, I mean, I think if you can make it visual and make it appealing, I think it works pretty well for me at least.
Yeah, that would be a good point. I think this only could work because you really have just two things about toxicity and pharmacokinetics. So if anybody else has like 4 or 5 unique value propositions, that's going to be really overly complicated to try to do a slide like this in that regard. But so we've given you plenty of feedback. Take the leap if you want to, and we can see what happens next week, and claw it back if it doesn't work. But go with your gut. You're gonna have to sell it. So that's why I go back to you owning it, right? You're the one selling it. We're not. So however you feel like you can own it, do so.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you guys for your feedback. I appreciate it.
All right, y'all had done some work on these last, so these next slides. So I want to go through these two. Okay, so
yeah,
go ahead and talk to me about this one. This is good work.
Yeah, this is basically where we spent most of our time this week really focusing on. But this is actually one of the harder slides for us. So I think initially we were trying to market JW65 as like ready to go to market because I felt like that's what we were learning in class. But then when I was looking back at the pitch deck from the initial like our IP holder, it was a lot further back than like ready to market. And so for that, we've kind of changed our strategy a little bit. And so I wanted to combine the go-to-market strategy slides. And then also I noticed that a lot of people from last year put in a milestone slide. And so I felt like that was really helpful for us to really think about like where we've gone and what we're doing. So up until February 2022, this is kind of the background work, the groundwork that's been laid about JW65, its initial discovery, the grant that we were awarded, and then some preclinical testing of the compound. And then the goals for this year and next year are to apply for these small business grants. And so that was kind of like our IP holders intention, was that he wanted to apply for the small business grant for further research and then also to perform the investigational new drug studies, and then obtaining IND, those investigational new drug clearance, prior to then licensing out JW65 to some of the larger popular pharmaceutical companies that are in the epilepsy sort of realm before clinical trials. And so our go-to-market strategy basically is a little bit more research and then giving it to somebody else who really can encompass and pay for all of the products or all of the phase 1 like processes. So I think you were probably referring to, we did like switch it around a little bit. There's a funnel slide that we were working on today. But I just really felt like, yeah, so it's gonna be this first funnel slide, this go-to-market strategy slide, yeah. Instead of using this, because it doesn't really say anything, right? I was like, yeah, we're here, we're in this preclinical sort of phase, and this is kind of all of the costs that are ahead of us, but it isn't actually applicable to what our compound, our drug. So we were kind of teetering back and forth between this one and this other go-to-market strategy. Can you guys give any feedback? We're really struggling with this today.
Yeah. How about I definitely, the one thing I'll say is like, I'm trying to struggle with the traction piece, which is usually a different slide, and the go-to-market piece, which is the stuff over the right.
Yeah.
And how we just kind of skip over what is actually the go-to-market part. It's like, how are you going to get with these people? What do these relationships mean to you, right? What does the license mean to you? It means, is it mean manufacturing? Does it mean distribution? Does it mean sales? Does it mean everything? And then what is are you going to do revenue share? Those kind of things. So what does everyone else think?
I agree. I mean, I'm more of a timeline kind of person when it comes to this. Yeah, it's a timeline of milestones almost is what feel like I'm looking at right now. And then you have a go-to-market that you haven't really developed out yet. So that seems like a separate piece, which licensing is part of that. You could almost basically stretch out this timeline and maybe bullet points, say each of those things that you have there, big like SBIR, IND, you know, like, because everyone's going to kind of understand what SBIR is. So you don't even have, like, some of that can be really condensed. But I really like timelines. They just are easier to digest. And when you have good bullet points, it just flows well and people appreciate what you say.
Good point, Eric. I mean, if this timeline went all the way over here and included all this stuff, and then included like steps to get to this stuff, then I think you would have actually shown us good traction and your go-to-market strategy.
Okay, yeah, that's like good food for thought. Like I said, we really struggled with this today because we had this one idea, but then we were looking back at what the IP holder his actual intentions were. Yeah. We didn't want it to like stray too far from that, so we were like struggling to combine both of them. But I see the gap now that's missing. So the
funnels are great. Funnels are great, but I wouldn't use a funnel here. I like it what Eric's saying. I'd stick with a timeline.
Okay, yeah, and then we can just kind of like elaborate.
Right, exactly. Sure. And then you don't have to have a traction slide later because you kind of laid out the whole thing. What you've done and what you're gonna do.
Perfect. Okay.
Other thoughts? Right, business model.
So this, again, we were really struggling today on these ones. Okay. So this kind of ties back into the like licensing out because JW65 is out of an academic lab. We don't have the money to sort of fund these phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 clinical trials. They are very expensive. And so the hope is to license them out to the larger pharmaceutical companies and then have them produce or have them go through the clinical trials to get to the like market piece. And then once it makes it to market, like have royalties and things of that nature. And then pricing, specifically going back to what we were seeing in some of the slide decks from last year, I felt like people had very like specific prices, but we couldn't really like come to an agreement on what our price should be. We know all the factors that should go into pricing, but coming to an actual price was a little bit difficult. So can you guys elaborate on that?
Yeah, you definitely don't need to have a fixed price here. Okay. You have no idea what it's going to be, and I wouldn't really focus on that. And this business model, honestly, it looks a lot like your go-to-market strategy. So maybe this should be what the end of your last slide was. And
okay, yeah, for sure.
I mean, I think you did a pretty good job here describing how you're going to get your product out. You're going to license it to these different pharmaceutical companies. They're going to do the clinical trials, and then you're going to have some sort of royalty deal. That's your go-to-market strategy right there.
Okay. Tell me if this is crazy. Can I have the timeline sort of like continue from the last slide and point into like licensing out to these companies and then have it kind of feeding into this sort of model and then kind of have it like continue over, something like that?
I'd just stick to the process flow here and not carry the timeline over. Because I mean, and the reason I say it is because where y'all are at in this phase, and the one thing that we can let you off the hook on is at least, saying a price, right? You're not there yet. And you don't know what that price is going to be because your go-to-market is providing your product to other people to ultimately sell. And then also there's the reimbursement and the third-party payer and everything else that's going to go into this as well. You being able to tell a price would be purely subjective at this point, and no one, it'd be anyone's guess. Now, you could put competitors' prices on there. You could put other, like, and some people will do this, and this takes a little bit more depth research. Like if there's a similar product that already has a code in the, oh my God, I'm drawing a complete blank, but a code for the insurance payer, then you could actually put that product up there. You can say what that price is. It sets a stage of like where you're going to go with it. But even that for y'all, I agree with Ryan. I think this flow is more important than anything else. And you saying, we're going to be working along this timeline with our partners to establish our revenue stream. But I think everyone is going to understand, especially if you say it, that your model is really revenue share, right? Y'all are going to let someone else do the work and you're going to get a piece of that. And that's not really anything to do with price point.
Okay, perfect. Then that makes a lot more sense as to why we really couldn't figure it out.
Yeah, you should be struggling if you came up with something.
Yeah, perfect. We definitely were.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's kind of, so business model, this would be more the go-to-market, and then the previous one would be like traction and milestones. So then if we can go to the next slide.
I'm gonna be just a little picky right here. Just, I don't know if this is something you're gonna actually say in your slide, but there is something that's curative for epilepsy. If certain types of surgical procedures can actually cure. I don't know if you're going to say that. I just want you to be careful with saying there is
no cure reference there.
Yeah,
that's bold. I mean, you gotta be really sure that that's the case.
Like some patients can get cured with an anterior temporal lobectomy. So,
but there's also like what is mainstream and what is scientific at this point too. I think, Erica, your point, not to detract from your point.
Again,
if you're going to make a statement that you'll be able to validate that with data. And I don't think that's including experimental surgeries and emergent needs type things that are in the FDA process, still only things that are kind of, out there. Would you agree with that, Erica?
Just being nitpicky, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. We appreciate you.
Yeah, I mean, there's really experimental stem cell surgery and stuff like that that is not part of the
No, I mean, ATL is not, it's not experimental. We do. That's the surgery that is done that can cure epilepsy for patient.
Then if there's a cure, then I would definitely put that.
It's a subset of patients. Yeah. Not everybody. If you have to start, I mean, Erica, I'm asking you, like, if you have to start splitting hairs on, like, I agree with you. Like, no cure seems like pretty absolute, right? But if you have to start splitting hairs and subgroups and subgroups and subgroups, and there is a cure and everything else, it's best just to say, don't actually make the call that there's no cure, or limited. Right, I just wouldn't say it. I wouldn't say it, but
exactly.
Unless it's bringing some point that you're trying to make, but I mean, I think you could do without saying that.
And I don't think it was that picky because they underlined it, right? So it really kind of called it out. So,
right.
Okay, Madison, you understand what we're saying in that regard?
Yes, no, absolutely. We'll definitely take that out.
Great catch, Erica. Okay, revenue model. So, I mean, again, you don't really know are these numbers kind of phooey then?
No, so these are actually like what the market spends on epilepsy in the US. Right. And then it's cost per person, kind of just speculating like the market that we can really get into, this $15 $1 billion per year market. Not necessarily saying we're going to recapitulate all of it, but, by adding a new epilepsy medication into this sort of model, we can potentially capture some of it. And then down here on the second graph on the bottom, really, I think highlights what we were trying to say earlier. I think maybe Erica had mentioned it, telling the story of all of the untreated epilepsy or uncontrolled, so the drug-resistant epilepsy. They spend almost $10,000 a year more on just costs related to their disorder. And so really tapping into this market would be very helpful, and it's, I guess, lucrative, for lack of a better term.
I think you're setting up I think this is good. I don't really have many comments about this. I think setting this up as a big moneymaker, at least the opportunity to be a moneymaker, is smart here. So that's good.
Yeah.
You're not really showing a forecast here because of what we talked about in the one in the past. You're just really saying,
right. Hey, there's the market.
Right. Any other comments on the revenue? Okay. So ask, right? So I'm going to go ahead and say something before you, well, actually, no, what were you planning on saying here?
This was, again, one of our major issue points today. I could not figure out, because going back to our milestones, we talk about applying for these grants and basically like not asking for money. Then we got to this slide and I was looking at the examples from last year and I'm like, well, what are we asking for? What is it? And so we couldn't really articulate like what we were looking for or what we needed. So
well, let me do a better job this week talking about it in these terms, because I think it actually makes more sense now to talk about it. It's like, and I talked to, I forget which team I talked to, I think it was Colby a few weeks ago about this. Like, there's certain things that you're ready to ask for an ask, and that ask is seed money, and it's $500,000. And then there's times, especially in the healthcare and life sciences space, where you're very early on and you still need to do trials, and you might only need $10,000 to $15,000, right? Mm-hmm. But that $10,000 to $15,000 will pay for all the study needs you need, and then at the end of that, you'll know for sure whether something is viable or not, right? And You can tell the investor a story about how viable it is and how much money it will make if this test goes well. And if they're willing to like say, okay, well, I like the idea of making that much money and it's only $15,000, so I'm gonna give you that here. So my point being here is like an ask doesn't necessarily have to be an ask. It doesn't have to be a large ask. It doesn't have to be the large ask. It can be steps towards the large ask. Being honest where you are in your process and asking for the right amount actually bodes more, better for you in an investment conversation than going saying, well, I really only need 15 to get to this trial, but I better ask for $250,000. And then you completely screw up on that, right? And get no investment money. So here it also could be like we going back, not literally going back, but figuratively or calling back to your timeline of, well, we are applying for this $50,000 grant, which will get us through these 6 new studies. Then we will be at this point to start the FDA process where we will then raise a seed round, right? So I referred to a seed round down the road when I know what that number is going to be. I didn't say a number because I don't know that number. I talked about the grant that I'm going for right now, which is going to give me the runway to get to the number that I'm going to ask for in the second, later down the road. So none of these slides have to be like a set seed stage $250,000 type slide, right? Does that make sense what I said?
Yeah, no, it definitely does. But based on what we were looking at from last year, I felt like a lot of them really had like quantified numbers. And so I was like, we were kind of like throwing this back and forth today, like, what are we asking for? And so then in the funnel sort of slide that I ended up hiding, I tried to like list out like what each thing was going to cost. And it was like millions of dollars, like millions and millions and millions of dollars, like that we would never be able to get. So then I was like, well, what are we asking for? What can we need? Like, what can we ask for? But that definitely makes a lot more sense of just like a smaller ask initially. Could it be because we're applying for these grants? Hey, I'm asking for money in case we don't get these grants. Like how should I phrase it sort of? Or should I just say like, we're applying for these grants, we also need this much money and yada, yada, yada.
Well, if you need money right now, then you should ask for the money. If you want money to be a backup for something else you're planning for, I wouldn't say that. I would say I need the money and this is my plan, right? Because then you're kind of hedging your bet, but you're not telling them you're hedging your bet, right? You're saying we need this for runway for operations and we need this to support the trial itself. That's another way of saying it, right?
Okay.
Ask for the money. No,
yeah.
I definitely would put, with those grants is so they're competitive. You may not get it at the time frame that you need it and you run out of money and you don't have anything. So like you ask for what you need. And if you get a grant, great. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, yeah, that definitely makes sense. Definitely. Sure. That's why I was like, how do we word this kind of thing? But that makes a lot more sense.
And you'll need, like, I like to think of things in phases. So you'll need at least a certain amount of money to get you through preclinical and like early clinical studies if you have to do those before you even get the drug license out. I mean, I don't know a whole lot. Ryan might, or somebody else might know a little bit more about how that works with a drug. I mean, I'm kind of more medical device focused, but I'm sure you'll have to have some money to be able to get to the point where you're attractive to license out anyway.
Yeah, because there's things that your postdoc salary and your research budget aren't going to pay for, right? There's marketing, all sorts of things that go along with it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you, guys.
And I do add other stuff too, like that's non financial as if you need it, like if you want, can you make warm introductions to like, someone who's in a pharmaceutical company so you can do a customer discovery interviews with them, or, there's a lot of stuff that you can ask for that.
Yeah.
I always throw something like that in.
That's a great point, Erica. It doesn't not have to be about money. But like she said, ask for the money. Okay, so team slide, you have a good start here. You'll probably polish that up. And I would like to move on to the next team. So I think team 3, y'all are in great shape. I think you probably got too much feedback tonight to digest it all, but just marinate on it. If you need more, input from any one of us, if you need us to follow up more on something that one of us said, please just reach out to us and we'll be happy to do so. And then we'll see all the new changes next week. Thanks, Madison.
Thanks,
Okay. Team number, what team? That was team number 1. Who is ready from team number 1?
I am. I can. It might be
Jennifer?
easier if I share my screen, actually.
Yeah, I can make you
We had
co-host.
some transitions on there.
Yeah, nope. I'm going to make you co-host. Just hang on one second. And then you can take over the screen when you're ready.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. We
You
see
all
it.
see my slides
Yep.
now?
Yeah. You don't have to put it in
Okay.
presentation mode. You can just walk through it through PowerPoint. Probably easier.
Okay. There's like, it's got a couple of like little weird transitions. So I might just
Okay. Yeah. Cool.
like, but just stop me. Anyways, okay. So title slide will make this more beautiful in the pic, you know, before the actual presentation. But what we wanted to start with was basically chronic disease being a public health crisis. Start with these infographics, basically, you know, highlighting how many people in the U.S. Suffer from a chronic disease, and that it's the leading cause of death and disability. And all of these, you know, diseases on the bottom represent chronic diseases. And then to go into kind of the, you know, effects on spending and the population, that chronic diseases account for 3 of every $4 spent on healthcare, which I thought was a pretty fantastic stats regarding that, and just highlight some of the other things here, that chronic diseases cause 7 out of every 10 deaths. And so our next slide then covers
hang on.
what.
Let's.
Yeah.
I'm going to stop you there so we can talk about the first 2 slides, and then we'll go on to this one. Go back one more. Okay. What do we think?
I like it. I mean, I think it tells exactly what they're probably going to say. It's not, this to me is not too much information. I'd like to see 3.8 trillion a little bit bigger, just like those things that are going to catch people's attention. Like that's one of those things.
Yeah, you got a lot of white space here, so we just call this empty real estate. This slide actually is nice. I like it, but you can spread these things out. If this is one image here, you can break it apart and different, you know, and just pull them out.
Yeah.
You can grab the 6 and 10, the 4 and 10, the people standing with the tag below it, and these things, and just expand them all and move it out. I think that's one of those things where that's probably would be my only thing, is like, I like it. It just seems a little too small for me, and some of the details that I want to see.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Also, I think, I mean, if I'm guessing from what the illustration is supposed to be with the 10 people, you know, like trying to highlight, you know, 6 and 10 or 4 and 10, I'd almost, you know, either animate, like just gray out, like, you know, 4 of them, or
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
8 of them or whatever, just to kind of highlight, like, you know, these many people, just kind of make that visual a little more apparent. But
Yeah,
otherwise, yeah, I like it.
Yeah. And I like the way you kind of started out, right? You're talking about the big hairy problem here and how many people it affects. I think that's really good, and all the areas of effect, and that's really good too. The next slide is the one that I think we need to talk about, though.
That's too much.
Too much, right?
Yeah.
This is a great infographic, though, but infographics are, I mean, I'm saying this because everyone knows this. Infographics are not PowerPoint friendly by any stretch of the imagination generally.
Right.
But pieces of them are, right? So again, if I had my little cropping tool and I cropped chronic diseases account for $3 of every $4, because I agree with you, that is a very compelling thing. $7,900 spent on healthcare. So this little, like if I could crop everything down to just be the 3 of 4, the 7,900 with the little dollar signs, and leave the little ribbon below these and a little arrow sign down. So like these 4, like the $3 of 4, maybe the 25%er, certainly the 1994 and the 2014 about talking about obesity, and this big number 1, right? So if you pick just like 4 pieces of this, spread them out, made them bigger, and talked about them without presenting it as an infographic, I think that would be, you know, kind of another huge layer of compelling reason why this is a problem.
Yeah, that's great. I can definitely do that.
Always hear death in dollars. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know who says that, but
No,
whoever says that, that's the main things that should jump out to you in all of the kind of, you know, percentages and details of the data that you have. If you have to narrow it down to 3 things on the slide, let it be death in dollars.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's a really good point.
Yeah, I don't know who
Sweet.
said it either, but it's a morbidly true statement.
Yeah, I'm not going to forget that.
Yeah, it is.
Okay,
Okay.
sweet.
All right. Any other comments about these first two slides? I think you're hitting the stage hard. That's good. I like the way it's looking.
Sounds good.
All right. Okay.
Okay, so next slide would then focus on, okay, what are our options for treating chronic diseases, which comes down to these translational gene therapies. And we break them down into the different areas, the DNA therapeutics, mRNA therapeutics, RNAi. And I'm going to add more diseases to this because there's a lot more than I captured. But essentially, there are so many different potential diseases that we either have preclinical data or clinical data for, or actually are in humans. But all of these therapies that we use rely on some type of delivery technology. And so that's where the lipid nanoparticle comes in as this method for translational gene therapy. So I'm going to describe kind of the basic mechanism here, which is basically you have a nanoparticle that contains your payload, which would be any one of these translational gene therapies, and then it interacts with the cell, is taken up by the cell membrane, and then released. And so some of the advantages of these LNPs is they're physically stable, which normally any of your nucleic acids would just degrade if they're not encapsulated. Obviously, so you're going to protect from enzymatic degradation, your gene therapy payloads. They're also low cost and relatively easy to prepare. But there are some disadvantages to lipid nanoparticles, and that's where.
Will you go back to that other slide real quick?
Mm-hmm.
I like having a slide that gives you a good succinct mechanism. So I appreciate this slide. I would maybe think about some of the scientific wording that you say and see if there's a way that you can do it in layman's terms. Just because, some of our judges may not necessarily have a scientific background. And so trying to figure out a different way of saying some of these things would be helpful for them, I think.
About 95%
that's a great point.
of people with money don't have a medical background.
If they knew it was good for them, they would definitely not have a medical background.
Right. So we were kind of letting you go because there's definitely a flow here, and you have, I'm just looking at your deck and on Google. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 slides, but I'm assuming that slides like 7 through 12 are kind of what you were talking about, animation, where the blocks just kind of
they're just transition, it's the same slide.
Yeah, it's the same slide, just animating. I agree with Erica, and I to kind of make a general statement is, again, you're leaving a lot of white space in these things. You can bring these things out, but you can make the words bigger in some cases. And in some cases, I think it needs to go back on another layer of the diet, right? I think it's too word intensive, too text intensive, and the size. I think maybe if it was bigger and less words, and making it slightly a little bit more layman, but I know you can't make it all the way more layman, it probably would stand out to me like, okay, I can get it, I can see it. But right now it's very, very kind of data centric, very word centric, very scientific centric. And I think this is the area that I'm worried about losing the audience.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think definitely I can put this in layman term and kind of take out the extra content in there that can be said too, and not.
But focusing on the disadvantages, I think, is a good way of doing it, though. You're setting the stage for why existing things are not effective in the delivery of the drugs that are needed, right? So I don't dislike what you're saying, and I don't dislike what I'm seeing. I think I can see something better to go along with what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Not sure I said that very well, but yeah, hopefully though.
No, I understand. Yeah, sweet. Okay, should I continue on to the next slide?
Yeah, just kind of go through those slides. Let's see that animation work you did and see how it flows. And we're still listening to you kind of walk through in your head the speech too. So I want to keep hearing that. Keep going.
Okay, sweet. Okay, yeah. So again, this is a little bit text heavy, but I think the point that we're trying to make here is that there's disadvantages of current standards. And what I kind of wanted to do was to color the problems with the cationic liposomes and the non-cationic liposomes. And I get that's where we're getting into that terminology that's too scientific. But if these are all the issues, then we can't use these LNPs currently for treatment of chronic disease. So that's where our LNP formulation comes in to address all of the current concerns that we have about the toxicity and the fact that it produces immune responses and that we can't effectively trap the drug and deliver it to the site of action.
Well, let me ask you a question. Go back one. So DOPC, DSP, EPG, COL, DFX, peptide, these are all different elements of your LNP formulation. Did these individual things deliver an effect that could be changed to the effect as opposed to what the component is? Do you know what I'm asking? Like, what does DOPC do?
So some of these are just true to like LNP formulations in general, and then there's some that are like specific to this proprietary formulation. So I think the DFX peptide is what gives it like cell targeting ability, which is not something that is in prior formulations. So you can do tissue specific targeting.
Yeah, so that's where I'm kind of going at. It's like,
yeah,
you don't have to take away the DFX peptide, right? But give me an explanation of why that's important.
What's unique. Okay.
Yeah. And so that, to me, what I'm trying to drive at is like, that's kind of a bridge from scientific to layman, right? I'm showing you the scientific, this is what it is, this is the element. And I love the coloring and everything else because we can see the elements becoming part of this piece, this formulation here. But give me the result, give me the effect, give me the reason why it's important.
Got it. Okay, yeah, I think that's a great idea. I mean, I guess I could potentially like try to make a version that doesn't have the, peptide, and then one showing kind of what has been added that makes this unique.
Yeah, just run with that. I mean, because you're setting up the stage with disadvantages, and now really you're ultimately talking about the advantages that yours provides over theirs with these different things.
Right.
So let that marinate.
Yeah,
Okay.
I would simplify the disadvantages of current standard LNPs, and maybe, I mean, because you're not going to want to read any of that.
Right.
So maybe if you just had an image of what they currently look like, and then you could show how what you did looks like visually, and then the audience will understand, hey, we put in this little peptide here and that made a huge difference.
Okay, sweet. Yeah, that's a good idea. I think this can definitely kind of be made and simplified and made into like an image. So
yeah.
I was gonna say, so when I look at the things that you have on the left, I think again, someone who's scientifically oriented will probably understand what that translates into. Someone who isn't won't know what's the importance of enhanced immunogenic reaction. What does that actually mean or translate into?
Right.
And then cation. So when you say cationic liposomes or non-cationic, like kind of think of ways that you can say that where it's just a general like it's a positive charge, right? Something that's positively, like maybe even just say that. Just think of how you can say something in layman's terms, because again,
got it.
One might not know what that means. If you keep this chart though, maybe it's just me. My eyes can't really tell that much of a difference between the colors.
You definitely can't. I'm realizing that too. So
they're pretty
so if you end up keeping the chart,
they're both greenish. Let's put it that way.
It's like one's like maybe North Carolina blue and the other one is powder blue. But anyway, I would do that too. I like I said with Brian, I like the different colors. I like that on the right hand side. Just kind of give more detail about what that means.
Yeah. Okay, I can definitely.
I think you're going to rethink slides 7 through 12. Is that right?
Yes.
Do they all fall together?
Yes.
Let's just jump to 13, which is the value proposition.
Okay, so this slide definitely needs work because I hit on some of these in the slides before, but kind of what what are we uniquely bringing to the table? So obviously we're opening up the arena of using translational gene therapies in treatment of chronic disease. Currently we have it established for RNA payloads, but technically we can do this with any translational gene therapy payload. And so that would obviously increase the number of diseases that we can treat. And then lastly, because we have this ability to specifically target tissue, as I talked about, we can also, there's other functions that we can build out. Instead of just delivering, drug payloads, we can also do, imaging. So there's, potential other uses for this and other than just, delivering translational gene therapy payloads. Should I go to the next slide or?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I did something to take care of. Anybody have any comments on the slide?
No, I mean, I would just say, like, I see where you're going with the value prop, and you actually, from what I remember, I feel like you did a better job of not just showing features. Like, there's some aspect of what the benefit actually is to someone who would use it. Like, you can use this for imaging now, which may not be the case for the other type of technologies. So, but just cut down on the wording. You can say what's right here, like on the third bullet point, but just put allows targeting and imaging, period. You know what I mean? Like, just kind of think of how you can succinctly
reduce the tags.
Yeah,
I definitely agree.
All right, slide 14.
Okay, so 2 areas that we're interested in targeting, which would be one, the drug delivery system manufacturers who are already producing LNP systems, but currently what they're producing can't be used in treatment of chronic diseases. So we want to offer them this naturally derived LNP formulation that will also do better at encapsulating and delivering the drug. And then secondly, would be to partner with gene therapy payload companies that are producing these therapies that could be used for chronic diseases, but they don't have a mechanism to deliver them currently. And so take home, basically, we can offer them a delivery method that's precisely targeting non-toxic, doesn't produce an immune response, and they can use it to treat chronic diseases. Okay.
Does anybody, wait, let's go.
Sorry.
Anybody have anything for this one? I think this gradient kind of lighter gray, I think these are just too light. I like the slide. I mean, I thought what you were talking about a slide. I think these need to just be all one color, maybe a darker gray than this, or maybe even whatever this color is, because it's definitely not black, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But I like the slide.
Hey, do we need to cut down on the word count on this slide?
Definitely.
Yep. That should go through a diet as well. Try to make each one of these things. It looks like you have 3 for each. Try to make them.
Yeah, I think this is
spread them out a little bit.
a good thing we could do in this next round is just take out a ton of text. So
yeah.
Anything that you can depict instead of having words there is better, so the audience isn't reading it. But if they have a picture to look at while you're explaining the picture, that's so much better.
Keywords, just 1-2 word descriptors, just to validate what you're saying, right? Just to back up what you're saying.
Right. Cool.
Okay.
You can I like, the sentence at the bottom. I don't know, for some reason I see this being like a check mark for each of these things, like non-toxic, non-immunogenic, precisely targets, like you know what I mean? How you can
I like that.
Yeah, almost like how commercial you see something that this is what we deliver.
That's a good idea. I like that, actually.
And also think about those 3 sort of summary points when you're talking about your unique value proposition as well, right? So like, rather than going through like all the sort of technical stuff, just like these are sort of the key unique value propositions that our thing has that isn't available on the market.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Okay. Anything else on this slide?
Not for me.
Okay. This is definitely the one that needs the most work, but I think has probably been the most difficult for us to figure out. So I think a lot of this is just or for us doing the legwork on this, identifying companies, and then some of these we know do, like all of these do make LNPs, but I think kind of understanding their specific LNPs is going to help us actually address if they these other points on the left side. And I think there's a couple more columns that we can add, but yeah, this definitely needs some work. So
yeah, and just remember, you don't want it to be too many columns, right? You don't want to be too
yeah,
many
I think we
competitors. It
can
just has to be the top, 3, 4, sometimes maybe 5 competitors. And we all know this slide is not nearly as pretty as the rest of your slides. You're going to take another pass at that too. Yeah,
definitely
just put the data
yeah.
in and
I think we can definitely focus though on, probably like the last 4 of these companies, and yeah, work more in that.
I think a lot of times this slide is a validation point, and it's another way for the people pitching to ensure that the investors aren't going to ask you a lot of questions about your competitors up on stage. It's almost like, yeah, we've done our research. No one's going to take this slide and go do a lot of heavy research on their own. They're going to assume that you're going to be able to talk about it if they want to talk to you about it with more money.
Right.
I'm not saying this is a throwaway slide. I'm saying it's pretty important to actually, to alleviate the opportunity of getting some hard questions about your competitors, which you just probably don't know because they're your competitors.
Yeah.
You only know what everyone else knows generally. All right, go to market strategy.
Okay. I think this slide probably pairs pretty well with our business model slide. But basically our thought would be that we'd better to set up manufacturing in not this market, but in a market more likely to use the LNP formulation. And one of the kind of critical hurdles, obviously, with anything is going to be the production of it, but that's also part of the intellectual property of what we that's wrapped up in the also new formulation of the LNP is also the assembly process. So it's this one-step assembly method, which means it's like very quick and easy to produce these lipid nanoparticles. So either something that we can do in-house or that we could pretty easily ask a drug manufacturing company to produce for us at larger scale. But yeah, this slide has a lot of text. I think we can.
Yeah, I think
kind of maybe make this more visual
strategy within what you said. I mean, let me just think for a second. I mean, let me just kind of get through this brainstorm I'm going through right here in my head. Okay, so Boston and San Diego, you've chosen those because those are high frequency areas of utilizing your product, do you think?
And yeah, in terms of the companies that
okay, turn to the partner companies that are in that space, the client companies.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's kind of your beachhead then, right? You're saying Boston, San Diego are ripe for target penetration with your product because all of the established clients in this regard that would be the quickest and easiest and shortest sales cycle are already in these locations. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay. So I think you kind of alluded to that. I think you definitely need to establish that that's a part of your go-to-market strategy is in these 2 beachhead cities where frequency is high, we feel like this would be the best place for us to establish our business because then we'd be in close proximity to our clients, right? That's a go-to-market strategy.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, that's way simpler.
Yeah. And then, so I think that kind of goes into what, really that first slide and that first bullet and second bullet are really saying the same, all the same reasons as to why those 2 areas are ripe for y'all. Then the other part is y'all are, because you're establishing here that you're going to manufacture this yourselves, y'all selves. And through this one-step method that is also part of your overall offering or your product. I think that's all important to say. That's part of your go-to-market. And you kind of said that. I just kind of would highlight those things. And so kind of think of this lesson like bulletized form and more of like, there's this piece of the go-to-market strategy, then there's this piece of the go-to-market strategy, and then there's piece of the go-to-market strategy, and then we make money at this piece of the go-to-market strategy. See what I'm saying?
Got it. Okay.
And certainly call out the one-step assembly method if that's part of kind of like the uniqueness of your product offering, that you can actually do this in-house and scale much cheaper, much faster.
Right. Okay, I'd be interested to think your thoughts on this slide then, because this is my best guess at kind of the business model. But so step one is this one-step scalable assembly. The diagram below is, from Dr. Mountain actually showing this procedure, basically, so we could produce it in-house currently, and it's cost efficient, quick, and easy to produce. So our second step would then be, some small batch production, what we could produce kind of in her lab currently, and try to partner with translational gene therapy companies that could use this LNP formulation. I think the other key thing is that she's only tested this with RNAi currently. So using this LNP formulation with other translational gene therapy payloads would be critical for opening this to other markets. And then I think, it'd be important here because there hasn't been the space for treating chronic diseases, that there's probably a lot of promising preclinical findings that just don't have a mechanism to use in humans. So finding those groups, whether these are academics or startups that have, promising preclinical findings for using a translational therapy in a chronic disease, and partnering with them to see if we can get those things into clinical trials. And then step 3, even though we have this, one-step method, I still think we'd probably be better served by partnering with a manufacturer that can produce our LNP at much larger scale. And below, like Precision Nanosystems and Avanti are already companies that do that. And then the last thing would be to actually target key translational gene therapy companies to use our LNP formulation with their translational gene therapy payloads.
What does everyone think about slide 16 and 17?
I'm getting more go-to-market vibes here than business model.
Okay.
I don't know if anybody else is feeling that way. It just feels a little bit more like that to me. Like when I think business model, I think like I'm a software for service and this is how I'm making money versus like this is how I'm getting the product out there.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good point.
Yeah, I feel like maybe talk a little bit about like, so what are you trying to do? What are you trying to get funded? So like, immediately, like what things are you trying to get done? Do you need funding for that? Like, what are your funding sources for that? Are you going to try to immediately start producing and selling to these sort of smaller academics and startups? Or is that something you're going to fund yourself and just, sort of give it to them on like just to get your like clinical data? Are you going to apply for like research grants, or are you going to try to do clinical studies right away? Sort of think about those points of like, what do you need to get done and what money do you need to accomplish it? Do you have like a revenue stream during this time?
Yeah, I think the good way to think of it is like go to market is how you're going to get to the market. Business model is how you're going to, the mechanism utilized to make money. Revenue is about how much money you're going to make. Right. So if you, because I'm getting the same vibes as Erica and Rowan were saying, is like, I like this. First of all, obviously compared bullets to this timeline, and going back to what we said about the last deck too, the timelines are nice. They both kind of have this good feel about them, but they are about a plan of going to market more than actually the mechanism for making money, which would be more about the license and the license structure and the partnerships and everything else. So I think the 16 and 17, and then just looking ahead at, at the revenue model, I think if you kind of take that mentality, it's like, how am I going to get to market? The mechanism I'm going to make money from the market, and how much money I'm going to make off the market is really the way to think about these 3 sections.
Got it. Okay, yeah, I think that's helpful because I think I was kind of struggling with like, what does each of these mean?
Yeah.
But I also think this is a good point because we're going to talk to Dr. Mountain again tomorrow. And I think we have had a lot of questions that have come up in, preparing these slides that I think she can help answer.
Yeah, she probably has some thought in that regard. And, I think that's great. So basically 17, 18, 19, and 20 are all variations of those three slides, right? So those three sections we just talked about, and then you haven't really gotten to the ask yet, but we talked about that earlier. You're doing a lot of, so the progress traction slide, you're doing a lot of timeline walking through with these other things. So if you feel like, just for everybody, that traction slide is really what you've done to get to this point and what traction that's going to give you, what leverage is going to give you to enter the market. If you're at this early stages and you've discussed like what you've done and what you are doing in the other slides, it's fine. But this is also kind of a slide for you to pat yourself on, or to have other people pat you on the back of all the accomplishments you have. So if you've received patents, or if you have received funding, or even this program, those are all great things to put on there. And then Jennifer, we talked about the ask slide just with the other team. So just think along the same lines. If you can't get to kind of like what your runway is, but I think talking with Dr. Mountain, this is another opportunity to kind of talk about what her thoughts are. Like asking her, what do you really think it would take effort-wise between now and like launch? And see if she's got any thoughts there.
Got
and
it.
Talk about that as far as what it would take from an ask perspective. And then the team, and then thank you. I think y'all have got a lot of good stuff here. I think it's going to take another few passes between now and next week. I think you probably have all the ideas you need to do that. If you need any help or assistance, though, all you got to do is reach out. Okay.
Sounds good.
All right. Good job. All right. Let's move on to team 2. Anybody from team 2?
Yes, me and Yugur are here.
Okay, and who needs to be the co-host, or would you like me to progress through your slides?
Yes, you can share.
Okay, all right. Let me set that up real quick.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So pitch deck.
And I can do the introductory slides, and if you was present, he can do the business slides, which are like the slides 7 onwards.
Okay.
Okay, so we decided on a name as block seed because we use an artificial vector in our technology, and we kind of have a slogan that synthetic biology to reinvent plant engineering.
Okay.
And then you can go to the next slide. So we will begin by explaining the problem statement, which is that there is a continuous increase in human population and there needs to be adequate food production. And the worldwide demand for food is expected to increase 58 to 98% by 2050. So for that, you need an increased crop production, which has to be nearly doubled. And then we also need improved in-food quality along with the increased yield. And for that, we will go to the next slide, which is...
Okay, so hang on a second. So
yes.
I actually, because you had and this is my bad, so let me apologize first, because you had this one statement here, you said that one statement, I actually went ahead and jumped to the next slide, and then I got myself confused, but I think you went through, and I heard them like 2 or 3 more facts about the problem. Is that true? Did I hear those?
Yes.
You're saying them I thought they were fairly compelling. You only have 1 on this slide. I love the design that you're going with, but I would put the other 2 or 3 on this slide too, right?
Okay.
You can make the, but you could, and again, look, when I say bulletized, I don't necessarily mean bullets, right? But you can have these change up the structure of the slide a little bit if you need to, but you got all this green space where the little flower and the pear are that you can move to other places on the screen and utilize this green space on the right to do that. But I would definitely add those other ones in there as well.
Okay.
All right. Any other comments on slide 2?
No, I'm going to agree with that. And when you're saying bulletized, I actually like, if you had one statement, it doesn't have to be a full paragraph or sentence. It can be, you're saying it in a sentence format, but we're reading the main point of what you're saying is increase 10 billion people by 2035, increase food demand 58 to 90%, two times demand or whatever food supply must increase by two times. Like those are the main things that, just if I'm thinking about what you said, I remember the most. But I'm not seeing them on here. So just those numbers really stand out.
Right, good point.
Those are good numbers that you're giving. So I would definitely use them to your advantage.
Yes.
Yeah, and your slide deck actually lends itself well to what she just suggested. Like it could be almost in a small paragraph with each one of those highlights in red like this, because you're right, we're not going to read the paragraph, but we're definitely going to focus on those big red blocks that actually look really good on your slide as well. So Erica, I kind of like, if I understood what you're saying, I think I kind of like that approach as opposed to the bullets.
Okay.
Okay, slide 3.
Then we kind of transition into the current market. So we talk about there is a growing demand for seeds, oils, and vegetables, but there's also a decreasing per capita arable land. And because of this trend, there is a need of the hour for better seed production strategies. Then we talk about the major players in the market, which are the United States in the Northern America region and Asia Pacific, mainly China and India, which are the fastest growing and second largest seed market with exponentially increased demands. And that's why crop yield enhancement has become a necessity to meet this demand. So here we also have to include stats about Africa and visual stats about India and China. So we still haven't put this slide together.
Right. I mean, I don't have anything to say about this because I think you're setting up the whole stage, the global stage. Just make sure you don't, make sure you're either supporting the statements you made earlier in the first part or, not contradicting them as well, right? I think this is fine setting the stage of how big this problem is. So I don't really have much comment about that. Anybody else?
No, I mean, the only thing I would say is I didn't hear you actually say these numbers. Like I heard you kind of talking about how big the market is, et cetera, but like maybe just reiterate what these numbers are if you're going to present them.
Yes, that's true. Right. Okay. Next up, we then talk about the solution and what we are proposing. So here we talk about block seed, which delivers a novel chloroplast genetic engineering strategy to produce different crop varieties with improved traits and biosecurity. And this biosecurity will be provided with reduction of ecological risks associated with the current transgenic crops. And we will talk about how we will contribute to instill a positive perception to GMO plants to consumers. Here we also provide a solution for reduced time for a new seed variety. So the current seeds take about 7 to 13 years, which is a really long time from R&D to market. And with our technology, we provide a solution for a reduced time for a new seed variety from R&D to actual crops.
Which is how many years with your product?
Yeah, I'm not sure in terms of years. I think I'll ask Dr. Alessandro about it and then probably write.
Can I add something? It will take like 3 years. The fact.
Wow.
The GMO also take 3 years to develop, but they spend like 7 years for regulation to have authorization to go to the market. But as we don't have any regulation, we can easily go to market with in 3 years for one seed. So, but yeah, we have to write down what we propose, like 3 years compared to.
So I think this is a really important part, kind of hidden down in the parentheses down here with this much smaller text. And then obviously the other side needs to be there of what your solution provides, which is significant. 3 to 7 is a huge differentiation. So definitely call more attention to that, as well as the other side of it, how long or how short your time is.
Right. I think over here as well, we can maybe we can include this in the competition as well, which we haven't.
Yes, you can.
Right. Okay.
Right. Yep. You can use it in both. Definitely use it in both.
Okay.
Other comments about the solution slide here? Okay. Value proposition.
Can I ask one question?
Yes.
Between the solution that we are talking and the value proposition, because for value proposition is kind of for solution. So how we can distinguish the solution compared to the value proposition, like the solution that we propose for the market, or like how we can distinguish both of them?
Did you ask how can you combine solution and the value proposition?
Yes, because for me, I feel like the same. We just repeat what we say by different way, but like stay the same argument.
See that. Yeah, I don't typically recommend, or I actually don't typically see the reasoning to combine these two slides, because most other decks I've seen, and trust me, I'm not necessarily saying you have to do this, they usually draw out the solution a little bit more, right? They give us more facts and everything else, and it's really about the feature sets and some of the other things where you are subtly setting the stage, and in a lot of ways you're going to repeat the same thing for the next slide after that. So 4, 5, and 6 for y'all seem to be kind of repeating the same stuff. So here's the challenge. Try not to. Try to make it different from slide to slide. Don't have all the facts on both sides on one slide. Potentially have the solution and your product on one slide, and then the value proposition that shows you the results of delivering those things. And then in the competitive slide, draw the big hairy X, red X around what they do poorly and what you do well. And I think that's probably the best advice I can give you for these 3 slides, if that made sense.
Yeah, thank you very much, Brian.
Anybody else have a different view or something else to add?
I mean, this slide right here is like that catch their attention about what you like. Our solution is a novel genetic engineering technique.
Rapid to market.
Blah, 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 blah. Like one sentence is a catcher that says very succinctly what you do, what you're offering. And then when you go to the next slide, you can actually really go into more detail about what your plant does and why that provides value in each of those different categories. This is like, now we see you're getting into your solution. You say that that catchphrase, that beginning sentence, and then go into the next one. That's kind of how I would do it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Because the value proposition, we've put stuff on there, and we want it to be like the USP of our product. So the solution can be like cut down, and then the value proposition can be put only the unique qualities of our product.
Yeah. I mean, I think more about what the actual solution is and less about like the values it delivers on this slide is important.
Yeah,
you value
your
proposition
plant
slide deliver those.
Faster more.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, just to
go ahead, Rohan. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, just to reiterate what I think everybody else was saying was just, in this slide, you're focusing on what are you doing, which is really, I mean, even though I think your name says block seed, you're really just developing this artificial vector, right? So like that's your solution, is this vector that targets the chloroplast. So that's your solution, and it has its advantages of whatever, and that comes into unique value proposition, but your solution is you have this new, novel, really cool vector that works on these chloroplasts.
Got it. Okay. All right.
So I think that covers probably solution and value proposition, because consider right now it's a little bit repetitive, but I think now y'all have a better vision of where you want to take it.
Yes.
Okay, so and this one is going to change as well because of that, I think. Yeah, because these are your tropic biosciences, your sustainable oils. These are your competitors right here.
Yeah. Yes. So these the competitors, they're offering the DNA engineering products currently because there's a higher adaptation to hybrid varieties by many regions in the world because of the increased demand. But our we want to say that the countries are adapting to hybrid varieties, but that's still has environmental impacts because genetically modified plants are causing environmental concerns, and they pose a threat to biodiversity. So because there is a danger of outcompeting native varieties of crops, there is still some regulation with the DNA engineering or hybrid varieties. But with us, we will have 60% faster and cheaper a solution for seeds, and we expect no regulations because of the technique that we're using.
The right thing.
Yes, and then we'll include the all these top players in the competition matrix.
Okay, why don't you give this one another run too, and we'll discuss it next week. But I think you have everything you just said is plenty of data to put into some sort of slide that shows a competitive analysis between you and your competitors. So I think you've got all the data. Just take another swap at it.
Yes.
Okay, so you go to business model, and then instead of before go to market strategy. Is that by design?
Yeah, I can take over if you want, Sadie.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's still draft, so I'm sorry I didn't really have time to work on it, but I promise you next week you will have better slide. Okay. So for our business model, we propose two things. One, it will be a service of licensing our technology or IP, and the other one will be a product that we will go directly to a market for the customer to have a B2C segment. So for licensing, it will be more the access to our technology. It will be free, so people can try and see the benefits of our technology. We will just propose engineering service that we will ask the business to pay for it, and also get some royalties on the seeds that they will sell at the end. And the aim is really to develop some long-term relation with this enterprise and show that our technology is very well and it works great and that everyone should use it. And for the seed, we are working on a potato variety. So we would like to sell and have kind of proof of concept for our B2B customer, like we have our technology and we test it and it works well. So it will also generate a direct cash flow that will help to pay directly for talents. And yeah, we think is a good way to go. Should we write down how much we expect to receive, like in the business model? Or
if you have a speculation of that, I'd love to see it. I mean, yeah, and okay. So yeah, I mean, this is about how you're going to. So remember, there's a little bit different order, but it's still the same thing. It's like, how you're going to make money is good to hear. Yeah. Now, if you start getting into the money you're going to be making, that should be in the financial forecast. But I think you got a lot here, and everything you said. I was listening before is probably a little bit more than I was looking at your slide. Just make sure what you say and what your slides support each other. But everything you said, I liked, right? You talked about the two different sides, the B2B, the B2C. I like that too. One is direct to customer, one is direct to business. One is quicker to revenue, one is a little bit longer, one has licensing, one doesn't, so on and so forth. So, I mean, I thought what you said sounded good. And I just want to make sure that, you know, what you say and what I see are aligned for the.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is good. And then we have a go-to-market strategy, is what I told before, but like for B2B service, we would like to develop some project with private B2B partners, so we can co-found and share the value of for seed varieties. Thank you very much for the question. And we also would like to propose some engineering service, for example, for the seed transformation or the block generation. As we have a plasmid, we can make the cloning for them and generate some revenue on this. And for the B2C product, we are developing, as I said, a potato line where we overexpress a potato tuber protein. And it's just a proof of concept that when we overexpress, we can overexpress anything with our plasmid and it works well. And it will be one product that we will go directly to the market and hope to have more seeds in future.
Yeah.
The financial forecast I didn't do yet, but for next week we should also have a financial forecast.
Hey, let me just step back for 1 second. So
yeah,
this is actually a message for everybody. So they changed their order, they kind of put GTM behind business model. But what I'm saying to you is, I like the way you flowed through those as well. So, I mean, these decks can definitely be changed in order as long as you don't kind of lose the flow. And we talked about this, right? The flow of the narrative, right? But this area is one of the sections of the narrative that can be played around with. So I kind of like the way you set up the two types in your business model. And then you gave me some examples of how you're going to deliver to those two segments. So I think it's pretty good. I thought that worked well for me, actually. So good.
Thanks, Brian.
But I'm just one person. I mean, it might, I don't know. Did everybody else feel the same way? Did anybody else notice?
If we can get you to invest.
An audience of one, you succeeded. Great. But
for Brian.
I thought the order was good, but I just I'd almost like to be just a little bit more specific in terms of when you're talking about like B2B, like what are the businesses you're selling to, and like what is the product you're selling to those businesses. So like just kind of big picture, like it doesn't, I mean, you don't have to specifically, but like what type of businesses are you selling to, and like what is the product? Are you selling just your IP directly? Is it because I guess it maybe just a little bit more clarity on that I think would have been
on this part. We are our client are our competitors because we are also doing this kind of seed, but here what we would like is first give free access to our technology, but if they require, we can do some stuff for them. For example, if they want some cloning services, we can do it and send them the plasmid ready to go. Or if they want, we can make the seeds and send the seeds,
Okay, yeah, I guess maybe it's just my unfamiliarity with the field, but when you say like, free access to technology, it's not immediately apparent. Like if you're offering a physical product, or if you're just offering like your technology. So maybe just a little bit more clarity, and maybe it's just my unfamiliarity with the field that I just don't understand like what. Like,
yeah, I agree. You're right. I agree.
All right, so you're going to take another stab at the financial, or a stab at the financial forecast. The team.
For team.
Yeah,
and for advisory board that will also come.
Yeah,
and then there is the progress. Today we would like to start the field trial for our potato seed line, and we are also looking for our first B2B customer to start to make some revenue on this licensing, and also develop some project with the business side. And in the future, we would like to acquire more B2B partners and also try to have our potato seed on the market, but also generate new seeds. And I don't know if it's a good idea to talk about the exit in the progress as I am, because I was hesitating to put the exit, but the aim is really to have some recognition on the field and have some competitor that knows our technology and likes our technology, because the aim is to have a merge or acquisition with them or have a new round of funding when we prove that our concept works and we can get seats in 3 years in spite of 7. And we hope that in 3 or 4 years we can easily do a merger
Yes,
acquisition.
so the background for this is basically the current big players in the field are they have a really aggressive strategy, and they are currently at the top of the charts only because of the mergers and acquisitions. So is it a good strategy to put that exit on the slide while pitching your project is the question.
It's always risky to put an exit thing on your timeline, because it's like saying we're going to sell in 2 years, no problem, right? It's a kind of a bold statement. Having an exit strategy part of your deck and your overall plan is fine. In fact, in many cases, it's encouraged. But I want to also caution you in the bigger picture that, and this is really a non-deck comment, this is more of an entrepreneurial comment. I've often found both firsthand and as well as other data-driven kind of experiences, or research rather, is that if you focus on an exit, that's about as valuable as your business is going to be. If you focus on a large customer segmentation that is buying your product hand over fist, then your value is going to be based on your sales and based on your opportunities and based on much, much more than what a simple like focus from the beginning on exit. I got to get to $20 million because that's what I want to sell at, right? I caution people to think that way. I think more like set the goals really far and long and achieve those goals. And if you're moving in those directions towards having a valuation of $100 million as opposed to I need to sell at 20, you're going to have a more valuable business, and the competitors are going to want to come and talk to you. So that was a side comment. For this, I think it's pretty important actually, but there's a problem. The problem is like, I haven't seen any names mentioned so far. So right now I'm like, is it Bear? Is it somebody else? You know, what is it? What is the big 800-pound gorilla that's going to come in and drop $100 million on the table to buy your company in 2 years, right? So yes, I think you should put it in there. Yes, I think you should kind of make it part of a plan, if not but not on a timeline. And yes, I think you need to introduce earlier on and then establish that here some likely suspects that would buy you. Who makes up that 70% of the market right now? Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. I think we need some name drops in the earlier slides.
Because y'all are a small little, company that has a novel product that is going to outpace in so many different ways 70-80% of the market providers right now. Someone's definitely going to want to come and take advantage of that. You would have a lot of opportunities for revenue share, a lot of opportunities for licensing. That B2B side should be fairly easy if your product does what it says it's going to do. And then an exit conversation is going to come rather easily within that.
Okay.
So you have an exit slide. So, kind of jumping ahead, it's almost like, you could say 2024 plus, you could put it out there. That's actually an open-ended side of the thing. It's not saying in 2024. And then you could also talk about the exit strategy, but I would like to see, I'm going to see these names hopefully earlier when I looked at the competitive, when we're talking about the competitive slide, right? You just don't want to have, I guess my concern is right now is like having a lot of things all around the exit is not going to be good it's not going to be very relevant compared to everything else for this program, for this pitch. You know what I'm saying? Like mention it, discuss it, reinforce it, and then move on from it.
Okay.
Does your ask slide, is that real?
Yes.
Okay.
We are asking for 200K. This can change. We are still thinking what is the good asking, because like it can be a little bit high, but maybe not enough. But we are three, so we think that 120K should be for the salaries for the current team, and also 60K for the fight trail, but I'm not sure how much it costs this site, so we need to figure out. And 20K for the marketing. That also, do we need to give more data about the marketing? For example, we need 20K for the marketing because we will hire a PR agency that will do some contact for us for the B2B, etc.
I think so. I'm gonna come back to the talent in the field trial. I think I know from all I've seen from all the decks, generally marketing is somewhere between $30,000 and $40,000. Usually for some reason I see $35,000 all the time around marketing. It's a catch-all. You're going to be able to build websites and do marketing and everything else, even for $20,000, right? So it's really not it's one of those things where, do you have something for marketing? Yes. Is there enough in it for it? Probably, right? So I think 20K is fine. The thing I'll ask to kind of pivot to the other two sides of it though is like, how long? I mean, is this 6-month runway? Is this 12-month runway? Is that 1 FTE? Is that 2 FTEs at 60? Is it 1 at 120? Is it 3 at 40? You know, what is it and how long does this last? And then just know generally that if you think it's 200K, it's probably more like 350 or 400, right? Because you're going to have more resources. It's going to be longer than 6 months. You're going to want to do more field trials when it gets all down to it. And the last thing you want to do is keep going back to the well with a bucket, asking for more water, right? So I think this is good. You're getting a great start. You probably only need about 15 more minutes of thinking about this slide, but it needs to be broken down at a kind of a more granular level around timeline, how long this is, how much runway this is going to give you.
We were thinking about 1 year, but like,
yeah, I mean, I think 12. When generally an ask should last 12 to 18 months. So, I mean, if you're saying 1 year, I think that's kind of the line of thinking you should be thinking. Because so just going back to a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about the seed rounds, like an early, like friends and family, that might get you a week, that might get you a month, but it's also going to be $25,000 to $50,000, right? It might get you a 3-month trial or something like that in that regard. Then there's the angel, and it gets a little bit bigger, and those numbers are like the 250 or pre-seed, if you want to call it that. Those are the 250 to 400 range. Then there's a seed that's anywhere from 500 to 2 million these days, right? And so when you're in the angel, and those are like in a matter of months. When you get to that seed, you really should think in 12 to 18 months. Like, I need enough runway to get me through the next 12 to 18 months to get this product to market.
I see, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Then you have a thank you. You had a timeline. I think these are all just kind of work in progress slides.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Did we forget something on our slide, or
which one?
Did we forget something like on the? Okay. No. Okay.
Yeah, I think we covered. Yeah, I think we covered them all. Did we not cover them all?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. We did everything. Yeah.
Okay. Do y'all have any questions?
Nope.
Okay.
But yeah, we still have a lot of work.
Yeah. I mean, I think y'all are about in the same boat as everyone else. A nice solid boat, not bringing on water, right? I think everybody's floating down. I'm gonna kill that analogy. I think everybody's doing a great job. I think everybody's deck has got a lot to it, and it's got a lot for it, and it's got a lot to be done to it, but all the makings are there. I think everybody did a good job of progressing the first half from the week before last. And then also, I think everyone's got a good handle on those slides that we added for last week as well. We have office hours available again tomorrow. Please sign up and send us an email if you signed up, just to let us know. And then we also, again, the 5 of us, Rohan, Erica, Shelby, Ryan, and myself, are able to do, time permitting, one-off meetings with any one of y'all, right? There's 5 of us and only 3 of y'all. So you could have each one of us do a pitch practice with you next week and the next week, right? If you just reach out to us and try to coordinate some time on your calendars. So we do have another session next Thursday. That session, we're going to do a clock. You're going to walk through your entire deck without any of us saying anything. And then we'll give you our feedback at the end. And then we'll see how that goes. I have high hopes. I think everybody's in great position. Remember, if you mess up, you might be the only person that knows that. So just keep rolling on. And I'm looking forward to seeing the progression from this week to the last, because I've seen a lot of great progression from last week to this. Anything else from my colleagues? All right, I am going to put this video up on the YouTube right after I render it. And so it'll be up there. I'm not going to break it up into 3 different videos. You just fast forward to your part, but all the comments are there. All the information is there, so you can relive it. I think everybody did a great job. Hope everybody found the input very constructive. I think it was all presented that way. And if there's not anything else, then we'll conclude the night.
Ryan, just one thing to add.
Yeah.
Myself, Rohan, and Erica all put our email in the chat. So if anyone needs to reach out to us directly, you've got our contact info.
Okay. Everybody going to chat real quick and grabbing those 3. I think y'all have mine because of the invite. Okay. And it'll be on the back end of the recording as well. Okay. Without any other things to close out, we'll just close it out. Everybody have a great weekend and a great week, and we'll see you next Thursday.